brutal war and disrupted our supply chains, and disrupted our supply chains, and Putin's unfair and brutal war in Ukraine disrupted energy supplies as well as food supplies, blocking all that grain in Ukraine. But we're better positioned than any country on earth right now. But we have more to do. But here at home, inflation is coming down. Here at home, gas prices are down $1.50 from their peak. Food inflation is coming down, not fast enough, but coming down. Inflation has fallen every month for the last 6 months, while take-home pay has gone up. Additionally, over the last 2 years, a record 10 million Americans applied to start new businesses. 10 million.
Oh, my God. That's, so
and by the way,
every time clapping steals.
Disruptive.
Isn't it amazing how many people start up new businesses when you just shut down millions and millions of businesses? This is like George Orwell wrote this speech for Joe Biden. A record 10 million businesses after millions were shut down and bankrupted as a result of the government response to COVID. But I got to parse through this. First of all, and I'll say what I just said on the Rubin report. We just had a great panel. And we actually talked about this clip, so it's fresh in my mind, and I could not start with another Justin Trudeau or Chrystia Freeland. My grandmother, she died at 102 or 103, and she was diagnosed with early onset dementia, which was like 80. I don't know, diagnosed with early onset dementia at 80, but she lived another 30 years. This is not to be mean, and this is not to be glib, and not to make jokes. When you've seen that look in someone's eyes, you know what it looks like. That's what it looks like. I don't care that he's stringing together sentences. He's clearly, it goes without saying, he's not well. But listen to the lie upon lie upon lie, like in 1984, in George Orwell's 1984, chocolate production has gone up 100%. And it's gone up 100% because it was, something's in my eye. Hold on. Okay, let's just hear this one by one. One lie after another.
And Putin's unfair and brutal war in Ukraine disrupted energy supplies as well as food supplies.
Putin's war disrupted energy supplies as well as food supplies. Putin's brutal war in Ukraine, that it's now been revealed. Basically, the West said, we don't want diplomacy and we don't want to negotiate anything. We enjoy escalating the proxy war. But Putin's interference with energy supplies coming from Joe Biden, who on the first day of his presidency cut the Keystone pipeline between Canada and the U.S., coming from the same government who it has now been revealed, although they admitted it out loud multiple times, sabotaged, allegedly, according to Seymour Hersh, allegedly sabotaged the Nord Stream pipeline. Putin is interfering with energy supplies. They accuse their enemies of doing what they are doing so as to create confusion.
Blocking all that grain in Ukraine. But we're better positioned than any country on earth right now. But we have more to do.
Look at this. Secretary Yellen. It's transitory inflation. Oh, it's inflation that identified as transitory. And now it's permanent. But we said it was transitory at the time because we treat you like idiots. Look at that face. She's like, oh, shit. They're on to me. That is Secretary Yellen. I just want to make sure. That is Secretary Yellen. Oh, shit. Why are they looking at me as they talk about inflation? And so we are governed by our inferiors due to our unwillingness to get involved in politics.
But here at home, inflation is coming down.
Look at that guilty look. That's like Homer Simpson level guilt right there.
Down. Here at home, gas prices are down $1.50 from their peak. Food inflation is coming down, not fast enough, but coming down. Inflation has fallen every month.
Look at that.
For the last 6 months.
Can't go on more with that. It's like another Simpsons clip. Stop. He's already dead. It's gaslighting of epic proportions. Now, a mess, Natalie McClendon says. It's beyond mess. It's beyond mess. It's a catastrophe. It's a man-made catastrophe. Let me rephrase that. I'd say it's a Joe Biden-made catastrophe, but I don't think Joe Biden is the one manufacturing this catastrophe. I don't think Joe Biden could Joe Biden can't find the hull for the State of the Union address. He can barely find his way around the White House, and I'm not saying that to be glib. I'm not saying it to be mean. I don't think one man is not able to create such catastrophe, because typically there would be smarter people resisting the catastrophe. In this case, we got one puppet carrying out the wishes of the people who are actually creating this catastrophe. And who do you think it is? Go listen to Jimmy Dore. Go listen to my interview with Jimmy Dore, or go listen to his clip that went viral on Carl Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson. Go check that out. All right. Speaking of catastrophes, and the role that some entities play in it, a deep state and administrative state, Operation Mockingbird, people, never ended. It just got digitized. Today we have Dr. Shiva on. And many of you may know Dr. Shiva because he's got kind of an amazing story. I mean, an amazing life story, but then also an amazing political story that began. I'm going to screw up on the year. It began 2020, at least the scandal. Anyhow, Dr. Shiva is going to explain it. He's in the backdrop. So, hold on one second. I knew I forgot something. I created a vivabarneslaw.locals.com live chat, which is currently running. We are live on Rumble, and we look like we're good on Rumble. Do we have any Rumble rants? We do not have Rumble rants yet. Standard disclaimers: no medical advice, no legal advice. There will be no election fortification advice, but Dr. Shiva is going to explain his experience and his discoveries. Good. We're live on Rumble, and I'm going to go to the chat, which I know that I set up. It's right here. And I'm going to join the chat on Rumble, where people can go vivabarneslaw.locals.com and join the chat. We got people, and we've got a $1 chat there. It says, anyone, the Eco Alliance whistleblower, Dr. Andrew Huff, has confirmed that he has been sent. I just lost it. Hold on. Has been sent a request to testify before the GOP-led House Committee. Well, as a segue into what we're going to discuss today, we're having the GOP Church Committee 2.0 investigating the Gang of Four from Twitter. And we're learning, some of us are learning what others have known for a while, what others have known for even longer while. One of those people is Dr. Shiva. Dr. Shiva, I see in the backdrop. I'm going to bring you in 3, 2, 1. Sir, you know what? I'll go back the other way. Nah, this is good. How goes the battle, Dr. Shiva?
I'm doing good, David. How are you?
Very good. Now, it's Shiva and not Shiva, right?
Well, depends on how you want to say it, but I typically say Shiva, Dr. Shiva Ayyaduria. You can just call me Dr. Shiva.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, because okay, no, that's good. There's many ways to say it, but I'm interested in the correct way. So, Dr. Shiva, 30,000 foot overview. I think everybody knows who you are, but give the 30,000 foot overview before I always like in a first time interview to get to know the person and delve into their childhood, which yours is extremely interesting and extremely relevant to everything that you've done in life. But the 30,000 foot overview for those who might not know who you are.
The 30,000 high level overview is the following, David. I have a deep interest in science, in medicine, and politics, which are 3 very, very different things. And the reason I developed that interest is, I grew up in India, which had a caste system, which still does. And I was born into that. And so you won't find a lot of Indians like me in the United States. And I was deeply influenced in wanting to understand why these systems of power existed as a young kid, 4 or 5 years old. But I also grew up in India, where my grandmother was a traditional healer practicing one of the ancient systems of Indian medicine. And I saw her, at least empirically heal people. So that got me interested in medical systems. And that led, my parents were very, very fortunate to make it to the United States, which is unheard of for people of their background. And I pursued both of those interests in a very interesting way, that my interest in medicine, the interest in politics, and all of that congealed itself in a field called system science, which is what I do, and, led me into MIT, did a bunch of degrees there, but always interested in a whole systems approach to understanding, be it the body, the politics, et cetera. And across, sort of a journey across East and West, science and tradition, ancient and modern, I ended up getting 4 degrees at MIT. My PhD is in a field called systems biology, but I also ran for office multiple times. But I've always been an activist, David. You can see a picture of me at MIT burning the South African flag as a 17-year-old against MIT's investment in apartheid, holding up the sign US out of Iraq when I was getting my PhD graduation. Half of the crowd booed me and the other half thought it was great. So I've always believed in movements are what actually change the world, not politicians, not media, but it's been independent movements. And that's something that came out of my understanding, but also have a belief and an understanding that when you understand the interconnectedness of the parts of anything, you actually find truth actually emerges out of that. And that truth is what we can really use to guide ourselves in our own personal journeys, but also collectively with others. But that's sort of the 30,000 foot overview.
Fantastic. And I won't spend too much time because I think it could be a 3-hour podcast on its own, but early life, you're born in Bombay, India?
Yeah, so I was born in Bombay, India in 1963. So I would say 3/4 of my, if you've been to Bombay, which is now called Mumbai, it's if you consider America a melting pot, Bombay is like an industrial furnace. You know, you have every religion, every language, different colors, castes, anything you can imagine. But I also grew up in a small village in the summer times with my grandparents in deep South India, which had no running water, no electricity. And so there's two very, very different worlds. And then, so that was up until the age of 7. I moved to the United States. Literally, we left India on my 7th birthday, December 2nd, 1970. And that was at a time, if you think about it, in the United States, when there was essentially the United States, the Vietnam War was still going on, you know, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And this very traditional Indian family, lower caste untouchables. My mother and my father were quite extraordinary people. The fact that they made it out of that caste system, come to the United States actually based on this thing called the American dream. And the day I came to the United States, I actually was wearing shorts and it was snowing, and I'd never seen snow in my life. And I asked my dad, why did we come here? He said one word: freedom. And so I grew up in, if you've been to New Jersey, one of the poorest cities, Paterson, New Jersey, and then to Clifton, Paterson was essentially all African Americans. And then Clifton, New Jersey, which was more working class. And then Parsippany. In the last 3 years of my high school, I went to one of the much different neighborhood, a public school in Livingston, New Jersey, which is very wealthy, you know. So I went from all those different ranges in a period of 7 years. So my parents just kept moving to the better public school systems. One of the important things to understand is when I was 14, I'd actually finished up all my math courses because I was so ambitious, because I saw how much we didn't have in India and I wanted to succeed, that I had gotten the opportunity to go study at New York University as a 14-year-old kid, computer science, finished this very special program and started working as a full-time research fellow at what is now known as Rutgers Medical School, doing research on why babies were dying in their sleep. So that got me interested in computing and medicine. But it was there I did invent what we now know as email, the first email system. So email was not created by the ARPANET, which is a big lie. It was created by a 14-year-old immigrant kid in Newark, New Jersey, where nothing's supposed to come out of. And we can talk more about that.
Yeah, well, two things. I have to make the Doogie Howser joke because what you're describing sounds like a different iteration of Doogie Howser. Just very briefly, because we all know we refer to the caste system. I think we have I won't say stereotypical, but a very superficial understanding of what it means. Explain the caste system. When you say people are born into the caste system, how do they identify that they're born into one versus the other? How are they identified in everyday life? What are the consequences of that? Is there a way of getting out of it? And what's the purpose of the caste system?
Well, so if you go back, many years, just to preface this, when I came to MIT, I studied with very interesting philosopher linguist by the name of Noam Chomsky, because I was very curious about the caste system. And there's a wonderful book, if people want to get it, called The Rise and Fall of the East India Company, written by Ramakrishna Mukherjee. It's a great book. But when you study that, what you really understand is that the original system of, organizing people into different guilds, okay, you're a blacksmith, okay, or you're a carpenter. This was sort of a division of labor, which had certain benefits, right, for society. That system eventually became this thing called a caste system, where if you're picking garbage all day, then your son should pick all garbage all day. Or if you're a coconut picker, your son should pick coconuts. And these were very designated jobs, David, very specific jobs. My family's caste was to actually pick coconuts, right? And so somewhere along the way, that this guild system became an actual instantiated draconian caste system, and you weren't supposed to move out of that. So broadly at the top of this heap were people called the priesthood, quote unquote, the Brahmins, right? The next level was the kings, the people who ran operations, governance. The next level were the warriors, or people called the military, right? And the next level were pretty much business people, the business caste. And then below that, you had what are called Shudras, S-U-D-R-A-S. It's like almost like the N word, okay? And those were further divided into scheduled castes. So we came from that caste system. So the designation was you were in this caste, you were supposed to do this for the rest of your life. So it's no different than color, right? Shades of color, no different than different languages. My mom used to say in India, you can get discriminated about 7 different ways: by your sex, by your religion, where you grew up, right? Language and caste, and so on. In America, she said maybe 3 ways. But the point is that the caste system is a very structured system. Now, around the 8th century in India, there was like the Protestant Reformation, there was a movement called the Bhakti movement. It was religious in nature, spiritual, and it said, hey, if there is equality in heaven, why isn't there equality on earth? So between the 8th century to the 15th century, that movement actually broadly took off, and it started having these embryonic changes in destroying this caste system, or embryonic changes. It wasn't done by any means. So, and what's fascinating to understand, by the 16th, 17th century, what the merchants, the traders, became a more respectable caste. You would call entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And that is when, if you think about it, when the Dutch East India Company, the British East India Company, all the Europeans start coming to India, they were initially trading with this emergent caste. But the net of this story is that what the British did, profoundly decimating to this progress, which would have been sort of, market capitalism in India, et cetera, was they realized that instead of trading with these traders, it would be more profitable to support the decaying feudalism. And they actually propped up the feudal lords. And in the Battle of Plassey, they actually occupied India. And then at that time, they went and got these old Brahmanical priests, and they rewrote the progressive Indian laws to take it back to draconian pre-8th century India. So a lot of Indians don't even know it, that the caste system was actually decaying. And to answer your question, is basically a vehicle for control, right? So the British could control castes in a much more profound way. And when you really look at the Indian Revolution, it wasn't really much of an Indian independence movement in 1947. Gandhi, in many ways, was brought in to transfer power from the British who wanted leave to the Indian elite. So white men with crowns left and brown men with white hats took over. So India never really addressed these foundational issues. India never had the chance to have a good bottoms-up revolution, which would have occurred in the 20s had not Gandhi come in and essentially been used as a front man for the elites to subvert this much more populist movement that was also taking place.
That's actually fascinating. And we shouldn't spend too much time on this, because there's other stuff that's, I say, equally fascinating and probably more relevant to what we're living through now. One last question, though. If you married up or married down, was it a one-way ticket down, or could you marry up in the caste system?
You could, and it was very downly looked upon, particularly by the family that you were marrying up into, right? Some people also opted to change their religion. There was a lot of pressure in that time to become Christians, for example, because Christians were put into a different realm. Some people became Muslims, you say, but this was a Hindu caste system. So you could marry. So if you, let's say, a man married a Brahmin woman, right? There would be certain benefits, but the couple would suffer a lot by the community because of their quote unquote intercaste marriage. Okay. And in fact, there were, incidents of violence and so on that would take place also, which still do, by the way.
And what you just said about Gandhi is something that I've never even thought about, and it's going to spark something in my mind to look into further. I've been trying to tell people Gandhi was a fraud. I think what people mean is, hey, they lulled people into passivity using a very, very eloquent individual, and as a result, probably, well, from what you're saying, did not achieve the revolution that they would have otherwise achieved, and it was sort of a stifled revolution because of.
Yeah, Gandhi was literally, if you go look at his history, he was not, he was a racist. He didn't really support the poor blacks and poor Hindus, which was a majority in South Africa. He was trying to fight for the wealthy Hindus to get trading rights in the Transvaal region. And what he did, any protests that he did, actually miserably failed. And in fact, the movie Gandhi comes out at a time when Indians are actually starting to break from Gandhi. Every time Indians try to break from Gandhi, it looks like the British and the Indians get together and they do a movie to promote Gandhi. But Gandhi, in that movie, you'll see one of the sort of leaders of who was pro-British, Gokhale, actually brings Gandhi into his home. And so Gandhi is literally promoted, and all these other emergent leaders were either disappeared or shot or whatever happened to them. And Gandhi gets pushed into the forefront in many ways overnight. But he was an Anglophile. He loved the British, and Nehru, who he sort of handpicked to be the next prime minister of India, was banging Mountbatten's wife. Okay. So the whole thing was an incestuous fraud in many ways, because had India had this opportunity to have this really bottoms up movement, you wouldn't have had this corruption that's essentially been embedded into India for 70, 80 years. Right. And we'll talk about many years ago, I went back to India on a Fulbright, and I was appointed by the Prime Minister of India to run one of the largest science institutions. And you could still see that feudalism had never got out. What America had was we overthrew feudalism. India never overthrew feudalism. So, and many countries in Africa never did. So they literally have these underdeveloped capitalist enterprises, right? Uneven development of capitalism.
Okay, fascinating. And I'm going to use that as the segue to tell everyone we're going to go over to Rumble. So here's the link to Rumble, because the discussion is going to start. The contemporary discussion is going to start now. Link to the Rumble. Dr. Shiva, this changes nothing from our end. I'm just going to end on YouTube. Sure. We're going to go to Rumble, and the discussion is going to start. 3, 2, 1.